Hello and welcome to Half Moon. This is going to be a conversation about how to save your life. If that sounds dramatic to you, well, it is. Because I'm going to be instructing you on essentially how to save your life, how to go from a life that you don't really like, that doesn't really have what you desire in it, maybe even a reality that's so harsh and so unfit for you that you find yourself manifesting physical symptoms of disease, autoimmune conditions, histamine intolerance, or maybe this is a mental symptom, a mental result where you're struggling with your mental health. Well, I'm going to be honest with you in this episode, and I'm going to be sharing how hard things can be, how bad they can be, but also how good they can be. I'm going to be really honest with you in this episode, and this is because I believe that vulnerability is the most potent medicine that we have to offer. I also think that it's kind of strange that there's so much of our human experience that we go through internally and we go through in isolation and we kind of pretend like it's not really true when honestly most of us, the large majority of us, have some sort of really significant struggle. And I find that strange, and I almost find that to be intentional for the survival of our species. I think it's intentional for us to kind of brush aside the things that are hard, because if we were to really focus on them, it could lead to demoralization. However, I also believe that we are ascending and we are evolving collectively in our conscious awareness, and I believe that the expansion of our consciousness is going to allow the positive change of our entire world. Why do I believe this? Well, maybe if you listen to that first episode and if you remember me talking about how within everything is the seed of everything. So even within this current political, economic, global climate of terror and fear, there is also the seed of joy and love and peace. And it is by identifying that seed and nurturing it that we're able to allow it to grow and take over and create a new world that's better suited for us in understanding our own human nature. We're also going to be jumping a little bit around, but I hope you're kind of used to that by now. It's the third episode after all. And before I even get started fully, I want to start off by saying what inspired this. This was the year that I saved my own life. And it was the year I did that, but I've had several years where I've done that. I have saved my own life. I have resurrected myself so many times, but if I'm being so honest, this time really does feel different. I have gone through an incredible amount this year, and on Saturday, it was my birthday. I turned 29, and I had one of the best birthdays of my entire life. It was filled with more joy and more fun, and really just, I guess, just an incredible amount of joy that felt so striking to me because I'm someone, I don't know if you relate to this, but I'm somebody who usually feels really weird and really sad around my birthday. And actually, like I said at the beginning, I'm going to be honest with you. So this is my last disclaimer of just the truth of what it's been like. So last year, on my 28th birthday, I had a really fun idea where I said we were going to do Cult Kaylee, and I invited a bunch of people, and I had everybody wear black, and I wore red, and it was so funny and so fun, and I was really excited for it. But I woke up on my birthday. I actually was dating somebody else, and I couldn't fall asleep next to him the night before my birthday, and I actually left his house at like midnight and drove home alone. And I woke up in the morning and I felt kind of off. And then I got a text from my landlord that said that I had forgotten to pay rent, which I've never done. And I had to run over and get a check. And then I went back to my best friend's house because we were hosting the party at her house, and she was cleaning up. And literally, while she was cleaning, shout out to Jacqueline for always being a space holder for me, I literally just laid on her couch and cried. And I cried in the most inexplicable way. Like, I was definitely sad and grieving, but I wasn't grieving a specific thing. I was grieving because something didn't feel right. And I was also grieving because I was just caught in this hyper awareness of my own birth and my own death and just like how finite life really is, which I think doesn't really bother me if I'm living in alignment with my truth and myself and my soul's purpose. And last year, even with the best intentions, I wasn't. And I literally cried and cried, and I actually started bleeding a week early on that day, on my birthday, which felt really strange and significant. And it was a full moon, and I wiped off my tears before everyone started arriving, and then I had such a fun time, and I was laughing, and I felt so loved. And there are so many people in my life that really love me, but it felt kind of weird because everyone was happy and having fun, but inside my spirit I felt so off. I felt so not right. And I don't know, even if maybe someone who's at this party is listening to this, and most people don't even know that that was the case. But then I ended up kind of crashing, and I like ended my party at 10 p.m. Maybe it was a little later, I can't remember. But the point is, I had this great idea and it was really funny, and then I don't know, I was weird about it. And then proceeded the most transformative year of my entire life, which literally led me to you listening to this podcast because I started it during that very year, which is only because I started posting on social media more during this year. And essentially, it felt like this coming together. And if you're listening to this now and you're in this point where you know you feel misaligned, or maybe your birthday's coming up, or it just happened and you felt what I'm saying, where you just feel sad and weird for it almost seems like no reason, but maybe just this layer of existential dread. Personally, I believe that that is your body remembering the truth, and it's remembering your space out of alignment with your truth. I think your birthday is like, it's the time where your soul came to earth. It came into this physical vessel and came into the world on its own accord, right? And that is kind of this transition from soul to body, soul to soul in body, right? And I think that your birthday is this somatic memory of that time, and kind of this checkpoint of, am I aligned? Am I aligned with my life? So I'm happy to say today I feel like I am. And it was funny too because my friends were like bracing themselves for me to be really sad. And everyone kept checking in on me and they were like, "You good?" And I was like, "Actually, I'm great." And I'm literally so happy. And so this is what I did on my birthday on Saturday. This is now the part where I tell you how good it is. It's literally amazing now. I woke up, I went up to Shelly's, who is going to be on this podcast pretty soon. She is my friend. She is just this wise woman who I met last year, and she lives up the hill from me, which you'll hear about very soon. But basically, she baked me a breakfast cake that was lemon poppy and had fruits, and she made it a half moon cake, which is so sweet and so cute. And I ate with her, and then we did sessions, which is, it's called neural manipulation. You might know craniosacral therapy. It's very similar to that, except it's focusing exclusively on the nervous system. So we did those sessions on each other, and when she did the session on me, I felt this huge release of healing, and I also felt super aligned with my soul's purpose. And after that, I went to see my friend Aleka, who's a quantum biologist, researcher, practitioner herself, and a brilliant, brilliant mind. If you are interested in learning more about what she does, actually, both her and Shelly led workshops that you can watch the recordings of on my Substack. But Aleka's going to come on this podcast too very soon. But I got brunch with her and we had an incredible conversation. And then I had my close only women friends. And this is because I only brought people that I'm like, I have been super close with. I've leaned on them, and also I feel really aligned with, their values. And I am so thankful to be so blessed with so many people in my life, and I could go on, but I just wanted to keep it pretty small this year. So I actually cooked for them, and I made a Mediterranean dish, and my friend actually came early and she helped me cook, and we had it called Oracle Night because I said that they're my oracles because I go to them for guidance and advice and they channel for me, and they literally made me feel so loved. I had them literally just come to receive. I told them not to bring anything, but of course they still brought things. I got the most incredible mystical gifts. Like, I'll just share, I got like a paint palette made of seashells. I got um this like chime. I got a meditating axolotl. Someone gave me a selenite knife. Like, so many cool random things. I could go on and on. This really cool indigenous oracle deck. I just felt so seen. And also, they wrote a prophecy scroll for me. They literally found a scroll, like a literal scroll, and wrote down what they foresaw in my future. And they wrote the most mystical things. Some of them just even wrote about like symbols and things and words, like random words. And I'm like, I'm so curious to see how this plays out. I'm seriously so curious and so excited, and I'm so excited to be in this year of my life where I feel like instead of feeling, confused or misaligned or kind of misguided, I feel so aligned, and I feel like now my goal for this year is just to essentially keep building what I've already started and continue growing in this alignment. And let's get into how this happens, how to save your life. So the first thing that you need to understand is that we as a culture and as a society, we intensely devalue our own peace and our own joy. This is very strange to me, and it's not right. Our peace and our joy are part of our internal guidance system. So our internal guidance system is essentially our body. We manifest through the physical body, and the body is actually what guides us and tells us what is right and what is wrong, what is true and what is false. And by getting really into the body and really understanding its own guidance system, we're able to then live lives that are more in alignment with our soul's purpose. So expansion and contraction is how we kind of tune in. And I will say it's so common for us in the devaluation of our peace and our joy to also disconnect from the body. And that's actually because a lot of times our physical body holds so much pain, or also because our lives have so much stimulation that it's hard for us to actually add all of that information and process that all in the body. So by getting back into the body, you're able to tune into the guidance system, which is expansion versus contraction. Expansion is your body's way of telling you this is right, this is true, this is aligned. It feels like an open-heartedness. It feels open in your stomach. It feels like the weight is off your shoulders. That's your expansion. Whereas your contraction is when you're clenching in and it doesn't feel good and it doesn't feel safe. And that is your body, your internal guidance system telling you when something is not true or it is not right. And when we value our peace and we value our joy, then we're able to move in more alignment with our guidance system. So the first thing that I did was when I turned 28, it's hard to kind of start there in this year of my life because, of course, there is a backstory. I'll give you that backstory. So 6 months prior, I had this intense somatic release, the most profound purge of emotions that was the most liberating experience I had ever had in my life. This goes back even further to the beginning of 2024. So let's go back there to start. In the beginning of 2024, I set an intention to inhabit my physical body. I had realized kind of what I was just referring to you about, that when you experience a lot of trauma, a lot of pain, suffering, a lot of information, a lot of stress, you exit the body. And I became very aware in the months preceding January 2024 that I was outside of my body. And I set an intention to get back into my body. So that's what I did. I set an intention to go back in, and I stopped even looking at social media for my intention was 1 month, just for the month of January, but it actually became 3 months where I did not go on any social media at all. And I actually cried every single day for 3 months, which I know sounds really dramatic, but that's what I did. I'm being honest with you. And it wasn't even like I was just constantly sad all the time, but I will say I definitely was experiencing a bout of depression. And I moved through that by this one single day that changed my entire life. I started off the morning listening to a hypnosis, and the hypnosis was connecting to your higher self and merging with that person. And I can't remember exactly what I envisioned or imagined, but I remembered it happened. And I had what I thought was a massage scheduled for that day. It was my spring break. This is now, I guess I wasn't clear. So I cried every day for 3 months. It was like March. And then my spring break was mid-March. And I had this one morning during early spring break where I did that. I did the hypnosis in the morning, and then I had a massage scheduled because I had just finished a quarter of naturopathic medical school. And like I said, I was trying to get back in my body and actually do a little bit more self-care in that way. But when I arrived at the massage place, I realized that somehow I had scheduled a 90-minute somato-emotional release, which was craniosacral therapy, but a specific technique. And I was at first disappointed. I was like, what? But then I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll give it a go. Bridge of incidents, right? Like, bridge of incidents, if you're not familiar, is essentially how you get from point A to B, how you get from where you are now to what you're manifesting. And I look back and I'm like, well, that was part of the bridge. So I lay down. I have no idea what to expect. I had had a little bit of craniosacral therapy done in my life, but I don't know, nothing ever like this. 30 minutes into the session, I started crying, and I ended up crying for the rest of the session for 1 hour. And it intensified, but essentially what I was seeing just the ways that I had carried so much throughout my entire life, and like the truth of my own suffering, and the truth of just the way my mind works, and the way that my life was misaligned. And I released it. And then I went home. I cried for 7 hours. And then I woke up the next morning. I took a walk on the beach, and I felt lighter than I've ever felt. And like I said, in the months prior, I had been crying every day. I had been constantly triggered by everything, because if you've experienced that, sometimes once you get back in the body, then everything starts to bother you. But at this point, I wasn't. I realized I wasn't triggered, and I kept waiting for the triggers to come back. I kept waiting for my body to feel the way that it used to, and it just never did. It literally never did. So that was, I guess, the 7 months before my 28th birthday last year. So that was the kind of environment I was in, where I had moved, I had grown so much, I'd moved back into my body, I had started my business, I'd been working on my business, I was doing a lot, I was involved in a lot. I was a full-time naturopathic medical student. I was the president of the Naturopathic Medical Student Association. I was a co-president of Energy Medicine Club at my school. I was just like working for another naturopathic doctor. I was doing a million things, and I was so misaligned and so unfulfilled in that, even with all the growth I had done. So upon my 28th birthday, I was like, okay, this is the year I save my life, because I had this feeling like, if I don't do this now, I'm going to keep on this track. I've had that moment a few times in my life where you kind of are like, okay, this is the time, because I'm seeing now the pattern. If I don't break this pattern, I can't continue. So I was already in half time. I was deciding to split my third year of naturopathic medical school up into two. So I was in half of the course load, which is still quite a bit. And I had this one trip in October, a few weeks after my birthday, where I went by myself to the sequoia trees, to Sequoia National Park. I spent 3 days just alone in this forest with the most massive, beautiful trees that are 2,000 years old. And I would just walk and hike and listen and be quiet and meditate. And there's very little phone service there. And I would just meditate under the trees, and I would ask them, what do you have for me? What is it that I need to learn from you? And the whole time I kept getting these visions of brush and bushes and fields where they would grow for a season, and then a fire would come and it would burn it all down and it would start over. And I saw this scene of just the growth and the burning, and the growth and the burning, and the way that it creates this layer of fertile soil. But ultimately, I saw the contrast between the way the fields burn and grow versus the sequoia trees that stand in one place, that observe neutrally, and they watch the fires come. And the fires actually can activate their seeds and activate their growth. They have mechanisms of defense to stand in one place for so long, how much they've seen. And I saw my own life, and I saw up to that point how I had grown these things and then burned them down. And I would grow and burn, and I would have these projects that I would start and release. And I was constantly moving and changing different directions. And I felt like the trees asked me what my legacy was. And they taught me about legacy. And they taught me about being still and observing and staying in one place and being in their center, in their own energy. And I drove home, and I just knew internally that something was shifting. So the months that followed, they contained some challenging things. I lost my grandfather. I experienced a lot of transition with my family. But overall, I found myself going deep, going inward, going deep inside of myself. And I began just fervently pursuing this knowledge, this esoteric knowledge, which I think I talked about in my first episode, just studying the ancient practice of alchemy, studying the true depths of the subconscious mind and these different modalities of hypnosis. Things that I had already integrated on a superficial level were just being taken so much deeper. And at the same time, I found myself losing focus at school. And I'm somebody who's normally a very good student. I'm very disciplined and very driven. And I found myself this one day just staring at the screen and looking at one slide for 3 hours. And I was like, something isn't right. I was, again, like I said, already half time in school, but something wasn't aligning. Then came early December, where I went to one of my friend's birthday parties, and this was all the way out in Joshua Tree. So I went out to Joshua Tree, and I was with her and her friends, and I was having a great time. Everybody was so amazing, like the most lovely people you could ever meet, but I could still feel myself kind of withdrawn, like socially withdrawn and really burned out and tired, which I felt like I had been for so long. And I felt frustrated by the fact that I was so tired and burned out. And I was driving home, and one of my best friends was studying for her exam. So I couldn't call her, but I felt like I needed advice from someone. So then I called her girlfriend, actually, which ended up being the best decision ever because she gave me completely different advice. And she essentially said, when you're burnt out, you need to kind of burn your life up. You need to actually recover your energy by cutting ties with everything sometimes. And she was telling stories about how she would work and accumulate a bunch of money and then leave and go travel and be alone for months in the other side of the world. And it was exactly what I needed to hear. So that day on that drive, I was like, I'm going to Bali. Okay, I forgot to say something. At my friend's birthday party, she did my astrocartography. And I think it was my Jupiter line went straight through the island of Bali, which is a really small island. So I was like, okay, what are the odds of that? I had never been to Bali. So then when my friend told me to travel, I was like, okay, I'm going to Bali. I knew that's where I was going. It had just come into my field. And it was like one of those days where I made up my mind. So I switched my schedule with school. I only took 2 online classes that quarter, and then I took a leave of absence for spring quarter. So this was December. January comes, and oh, I can't go into January yet because something else huge happened. I continue along the next few weeks, and one day I'm walking along the beach, and I don't know if I mentioned this, but I used to live like 2 blocks from the beach. I'm walking along the beach and the waves are insane. It was the biggest swell we had gotten here in San Diego. The waves were like triple overhead. They looked like they were 30 feet tall, which I know like in surf world is like probably like 15 feet. I don't know. It's confusing how they measure waves. But the point is they were insane, like massive. And I think the largest I had seen in with my own 2 eyes while walking along the beach. And it just the feeling of the ocean in general is so powerful, but if you're walking along the shore, picture this, walking along the shore, it's golden hour. There are waves bigger than you've ever seen in your life crashing, and the foam and the salt and the mist that they release goes so much higher into the sky. It almost looks like this golden, sparkling mist cloud. And the sun was kind of blocked by another cloud. And also, because of the power of the waves, it was lower tide. That you could still walk along the shore, but to the one side is the ocean, to the other side is a cliff. You're up against a cliff, and the waves weren't going all the way up to the cliff, but it was this feeling like it could, like I was risking something by walking along the shore alone, and this feeling of that the ocean could take me if it wanted to. And I walked and I sat there and I watched these waves, and then I walked back, and again, I'm like the only person walking along the shore. I just think because if you've been there and you've seen it, it just gives you this energy where they don't just walk on the beach, they stay on the cliff in awe. And I don't know what made me want to walk on the shore, but like I'm saying, it was safe. Like there was sand still to walk on. But I walk, and on the way back, the sun dips below the cloud that was blocking it, and the mist was just completely white and gold. And I look around at the sand, and it's like glittering and alive and vivid. And it felt like everything all of a sudden was so high def. Every color, every texture, every smell, everything was like so vibrantly alive. And I felt this overwhelming sensation. Sit down and meditate on love. So I sat down and I closed my eyes and I meditated on love. And almost immediately, I felt energy shooting up from my sacrum all the way up my spine, all the way up to my brain, and then out of my head, and then around me on both sides. And the energy felt like it was just shooting up and spinning, and it was like I watched my energy centers, my chakras, go red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, all the way up my body. And then everything started spinning. And it was like my consciousness went into my mind, into my pineal gland. It looks like a pine cone. And then it started spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning until my head looked like a pine cone, and I looked like the Buddha statues. I know this might sound a little weird, this is just what happened, right? And then I can't even explain what happened, but it was like memories and everything. And like, it was like I was outside of time. It was like everything was fitting together. And it was like so much love and so much ecstasy and so much energy moving through me. And then it was like I could go inside of my blood vessels, and I was like small and then I was big. And it was, I don't know. It's hard to translate that experience into words, but Aleka is Hindu, and she said that that sounds like a Kundalini awakening, and I'm going to ask her more about that when she comes on the podcast because she has a lot to say about that. But essentially, I stood up, and also, I mean, I hope it's clear that I was 100% sober, but I had this just random, profound psychedelic spiritual experience, and I would just walked along the shore and went home. And I sat there for the rest of the night, and I was like, what was that? What happened? What do I do now? It it's so hard to explain because I look back and it's one of those moments that I can see changed everything, but yet I can't explain how or why. It wasn't just this like one day, you know what I mean? Like everything was fixed, but then it felt like my consciousness just changed. And still to this day, I will say to this day, the most profound shift I've experienced is love. Like I can see love in everyone and everything, and I feel this deep joy and deep love for everything and everyone, and these old judgmental patterns that I had, and these other like controlling things that I had, it just all melted away. And I can't hold on to resentment. I can't hold on to unforgiveness. Like it just simply it doesn't work. But once that happened, I ended up, it just, life just changed. I withdrew from everyone except for very few people. I pulled back and I continued learning and researching and just manifesting. And right after that point, that was December 18th. Wow. December 23rd was the day that I posted a TikTok video about essentially how small, relatively, the amount of information that humans perceive with our five senses is compared to the amount of information we know is available. And it got over 100,000 views. And I recorded that video right after I did my hypnosis that's called Envision the Highest Outcome, which you can find on my Substack. It's under the Energy Recalibration Toolkit. I did that 11-minute hypnosis, and I envisioned myself going viral. And then I didn't even have a video idea. I just got out of that hypnosis and just recorded that whole thing. And then it happened, and it happened so fast. And I just continued moving in sync. I started posting my downloads in my channel and essentially preparing to go to Bali. And I prepared and I asked the universe and I said, well, how am I going to do this? Because now I was financially dependent on myself and I wasn't in classes, right? So I essentially started manifesting money. And within just a few weeks, I realized I found this account from when I was a teacher for 3 years that I didn't have access to. But there was something about the amount of time now that I hadn't been a teacher for where I could take the money out, which was something I completely forgot about, but that came to me in meditation to just search it up and see. And then within a few weeks, I got this check in the mail for $17,000, which I was like, okay, well, now I can go. So I spent a few more months just really grounding and processing. And then in March, I went over to Bali, where I began the trip by meeting up with some of my friends. And one of my friends, Madison, runs retreats. It's called House of Muse. So I started off at her retreat, and it was so beautiful and fun. But then after the retreat, I still felt kind of socially burned out, and I was like, I need to recollect my energy. I began fixating on my experience, that Kundalini awakening, and I realized that there was this pattern I was recognizing between minerals and the electrical activity of the body and the ability for the body to perceive spiritual information. So I wanted to perceive that. And essentially one thing led to another that was essentially everything that could go wrong did all at once, where the opposite of what I was manifesting began happening. And this is where we get into this conversation about layers of fate versus free will, and how we have this partial control over our reality, but exactly how the things we desire come into our lives isn't totally in our control. And at the same time, there are things that I believe we need to experience. We are existing within this construct of space time and fate, and within this collective consciousness. And basically, if you want the full story, I went over that in my Spiral seminar, which is totally free, and I'll link that below. But I got all of my money stolen, and it was someone had scanned my debit card, and it was set to overdraft my savings, and overnight somebody had gone to an ATM and completely taken every single penny out of my account except for $16. And at the same time, I was going through all of this chaos back in California, where the situation, I was subletting my apartment, kind of blew up in my face. And what else happened? I was covered in bug bites, mosquito bites. I don't know. The full story is in the Spiral seminar, but the point is everything was going wrong. And I went over to Madison's house, and I literally crawled into her house, and I said, I am gonna freak out. Like, I'm going crazy. I literally can't do this. I am so stressed. And she said, I think we need to go to the beach and give this to the ocean. And she took me on her bike. We went to this insane beach, and we started off by just kind of walking, and already I felt a lot better. Walked, got water. We then sat in some tide pools, and I said this prayer. And I do this practice where I hold a rock in my hand. Maybe I'll hold it to my heart or my forehead if no one's around and I don't want to look crazy. But I held it to my chest this time. And I said, God, I pray to be taken to the other side. And then I throw the rock into the water. And this is to me the symbol of letting go, but it's also the symbol of transmutation, where solid moves to liquid and energy is essentially transferred. So it's transferred out of me. And I stand up, and we're walking back on the shore when all of a sudden my body starts heaving and I become incredibly nauseous. And a backstory about me is that I had a phobia of throwing up, where I hadn't thrown up for 16 years. I hadn't thrown up since I was 12. And all of a sudden I felt so nauseous, and my body started like heaving, and I was like, what? Because I'm telling you, under no circumstance, no matter how sick I was, if I was like in college and drinking, like no circumstance ever did I ever feel like I had to throw up. But all of a sudden it overtook me, and I ran up to the top of the shore, and there just happened to be this hole that was already dug in the sand, and my body just took child's pose. And in my mind I was like, no, 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 because like I said, it was like my biggest fear. And Madison followed me and she put her hand on my back and she said, "It's safe to let go." And then I literally started letting go. And I joke now that it was my sober ayahuasca ceremony because I felt this dark energy. I felt this, felt like black tar just leaving my body. And it started off with the circumstance I was in. And then it continued with the entire past that I had had. And it felt like everything that was holding me back just left. And what was crazy is that, remember, we just talked about the spiral studies last episode. That morning was the first time I went through the spiral system all the way through, kind of testing it for myself because so much was going wrong in my life. I was like, let's see if this works. So I did the spiral system. All this happens. I go to the beach. I literally purge out my entire life. I stand up and I said, I haven't thrown up in 16 years. And she was like, what? And then I started like dancing and I felt so alive and happy. And I was like, I don't care if everything keeps going wrong for the rest of my life because I feel so light and so free right now. And I have discovered the thing inside me that can't be taken away. And I literally meant it. And I went back home that night and I prayed and I literally just prayed. There's this song, it's a Christian song called The Blessing. And I sang that song and it essentially says like, may your favor, wait, what does it say? May his favor be upon you for 1,000 generations and your family and your children and their children and their children. May his presence go before you and beside you and behind you, all around you and within you. He is with you. And I said that and I sang that song again and again and again over all of the circumstances and all of the people in my life that were doing things that were very stressful and very not right, not aligned. And I said it until I meant it. And I blessed everyone and everything. And I blessed myself. And I blessed them instead of cursing them because I realized after that moment how blessed I am and how I have this thing in me that can't be taken. I have this connection to God that can't be taken. And like the only reason that people act in these ways is because they are so hurt and so disconnected with themselves. And I choose not to curse them. I choose to bless them. And again, for the sake of time, without going into details, essentially in this circumstance, I had 3 days until everything would literally blow up. And without me doing or saying or forcing anything, everything fit back together. All of the stuff back home got completely cleared up and reversed. I got all my money back. And even more, my business exploded. I got 100 new applicants for new clients. I just experienced this massive success and contrast. And this was all early April. And the only thing at the time when I was leaving Bali that was missing was my headphones because I'd left them in a Gojek, which is like the Ubers in Bali. And I was like, whatever, I guess that's gone. And then I go to Japan by myself and I say, you know, I was, I guess just like wanting to be in this organized, structured environment and like really see Japan because I hadn't been there, but I was treating it like a long layover. This was part of my journey back. So when I'm in Japan, I randomly get this WhatsApp message from an unknown number, and it's the Gojek driver from weeks ago. I think it had been like almost a month at that point. And he says, I have your headphones. I've been trying to figure out how to contact you. He ends up giving my headphones back to my friend in Bali, who then ends up mailing them to me when she returns to the US, and I literally have them right now. You can't make it up. So the spiral studies really does work. I have to be honest with you. check out the Spiral Seminar if you haven't yet, because I really want you to experience this too. Okay, so that's essentially the collapse in the beginning of the expansion, but then what happens? I go home, I have to essentially build a new life, right? Because now I had basically changed my entire life. I go to Oregon, which is a separate story I can go into another time, and then finally I make my way back down and I live with my sister and brother-in-law for a whole month, and I move my stuff into storage, and I'm kind of buying myself time waiting to figure something out. Back to Shelly, who I spent my morning of my birthday with. I was up at her house in late May, and I was like, I don't know where to go. I don't know what I need. I know I need to slow down, but I don't know what to do. And she did a session on me, and in the session, I just asked God, where am I supposed to be? Where am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to do? And I hear, like, I should live here in this small town. And I was like, what? Okay. I look up on Zillow, and there's one apartment in the town with an undisclosed address. So I message them and I say, hey, can I tour this? And it was a guest house on a land. And it was like really private and really beautiful. I drive out there, and the morning of, they give me the address, and it's on Shelly's street. So basically that day I signed the lease, and now I'm neighbors with Shelly. So I move. Keep in mind, I'm living by the beach. I move to Bali. Then I travel. Then I come back by the beach, but with my sister and brother-in-law. And then I move into what I call the middle of nowhere, but it's not. It's a small town. But it feels like the middle of nowhere to me. And since June, the rest of this time has essentially been integration. I have taken my time to slow down, to build sustainable systems, sustainable structures, and realign myself with this new path. Because when you save your own life, when you change the compass, the direction that you're heading in, when you shift your own self in your life to such an intense degree, you have to allow the oscillations of your consciousness to happen. Every expansion is preceded by a contraction. So before I went to Bali, my life was contracting in on itself. And then I experienced this insane expansion and this deep contraction. So now from June all the way through the summer into the fall, I was just grounding, figuring out who am I now and who is this person, Kaylee, now that my life has changed so much. How is my life going to stabilize? How am I going to hold this new energy, this new role, and this new responsibility that I have created? I shifted out of a track I was on where I was just going to essentially become a naturopathic doctor, to now having this vision of Half Moon, this virtual school of conscious creation, this creative exploration of healing, human consciousness. I want to build something with my life now that is so much bigger than anything I could have ever expected. And now I have you guys, I have this community on the internet that supports me and sees me and encourages me. I have friends and relationships that are the most profound things, and this has all changed in the last year. And of course, many of my friends I've had for years and years, but still, just in the last year, I think there were 4 people that came over on Saturday that I'm even closer to and that I met within the last year. And I could not be more grateful. This is really hard to kind of summarize with just this short episode, because I can't even explain how much has changed. I'll say more actually, because I had this experience in my life where I took 8 months of my life without a bed or a couch. I can talk about that more again another time, but I was trying to explore how having furniture influences my subconscious mind. And I had this really fun time where I was like able to move my stuff on the floor around so much. And then in the new year, while I was 28, I got all new furniture, and then I sold or gave all of that furniture away, and then got all new furniture again. And I have gone, like, my clothes that I wear, I have given away so many of them. I have almost every single piece I have is new, but by new I mean secondhand, given to me from friends or from stores. And of course, I also got a few new things, but I I am so fundamentally different than who I was a year ago, and my life and the trajectory of the life that I'm on now is so fundamentally different. So, in summary, what we need to do is we need to let go. We need to allow ourselves to explore the ways that we are creating rigid structures that impede our growth. Maybe it's the clothes you're wearing. Maybe it's the school you're in. Maybe it's the environment you're in. Maybe it's your furniture. Maybe it's just the general energy of the space that you're in. If you want to save your life, sometimes you need to let it all go. If you want to save your life, sometimes you need to allow the old life to die. Here's why this is true. It's because your subconscious mind is constantly aware of every single memory attached to every single one of your possessions, every item of clothing. Your subconscious mind is aware of the person every single person in your life expects you to be. So when you're constantly being reminded of the past, you're constantly fulfilling the expectations that others have of you, even if it's just your environment, your job, your friends, your family. Sometimes there comes a time in your life where you need to let it all go. And I'm telling you this in this way because pretty much nobody has ever told me this, except for London. Thanks, London. But it's true. It's true, and I wish I knew it sooner, and I wish I knew I wasn't insane for doing this, and I wish I knew that this is what more people need. We are, as human beings, designed to be nomadic a lot of the time. We're designed to let things go. We're designed to be like the trees that grow and let things fall so that new can come. I want to read you a poem that I wrote back in the spring, and it's called, let's see, If You Want the Resurrection, You Must Be Brave Enough to Die. Asking how much grief can be held inside you is like asking how much iron a boat can hold without sinking. Being has an inevitable buoyancy. The water only holds you under when you hold on. I came here to be made new when I didn't know what that meant, and I found that wholeness is just letting go of all that's not yours. You can't get to the kingdom if you're not like a child. You can't get in the kingdom without child's pose. I spent 3 days washing marigold petals from my hair, and sadness from my spirit, and rivers from my eyes. I came for resurrection. I came brave enough to die. In conclusion, I want to leave you with my final thoughts, which is that there is no arriving. That's the first thing. The first thing is to understand that there is no place that we ever end up in life where we are done. The entirety of life is to be experienced. We have oftentimes resistance to pain, we have resistance to change, but the truth is when you expand your consciousness, you witness both poles to a greater degree. You are not here to live a comfortable, easeful life. You are here to evolve your eternal soul through the evolution of your mind. You are here to explore the limits of your own personal autonomy the influence of your own consciousness on your local reality. That's why you're here. So if you want to change your life, you must allow the old to die, which is the only way that you can truly trust the new life is coming. I am someone who has taken risks. I have taken so many risks. I have hit points in my life so many times where if God didn't show up, I wouldn't be here. And every single time, God shows up. But oftentimes, our deepest fear is that when we really need God, nothing is there, and that God is just an illusion or a construct of our consciousness. That is not true, but the only way you can know for sure is if you experience with your own reality. Experiment with your life, and you will save it. Thank you so much for listening today. You just heard the 3rd episode of Half Moon, a creative exploration of healing and human consciousness. If you are interested in supporting this podcast, I would love to refer you to our Substack, where I include my writings. I have live and recorded workshops available for you. I have a mini course, and if you feel like you really resonate with these concepts and you want to learn more, please go ahead and check that out at the link below. And if you don't already, make sure that you follow me at Alchemy by Kaylee. That's Kailee. And you can also go ahead and make sure that you've accessed the free Spiral seminar, which will keep you in the loop about all things related to this podcast, working together, and the Spiral studies. And lastly, if it's not too much to ask, you can go ahead and leave a 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast to. It really helps support this show and get it into the ears of whoever needs to hear it. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.